The crystal chandeliers sparkled like diamonds hanging from the ceiling. Expensive perfume mixed with the smell of catered food filled the air. Women in designer gowns laughed softly, while men in custom suits discussed their latest business deals. This wasn't just another party. This was the kind of event where a single plate of appetizers cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Robert Harrison stood in the center of his Manhattan penthouse, feeling like a king surveying his kingdom. He had built his tech company from nothing, and now he was worth more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. Every year he threw this charity gala, not because he cared much about charity, if he was being honest with himself, but because it was what wealthy people did. It looked good. It felt powerful. And it gave him a chance to show off his incredible home with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Tonight, about 50 of the city's richest people filled his living room. They sipped champagne that cost $800 a bottle. They admired his art collection. They complimented his taste. Robert loved every second of it. He had grown up with nothing, wearing hand-me-down clothes and eating cereal for dinner some nights. Now look at him. Now he was the one people wanted to impress. Near the massive grand piano in the corner, something caught Robert's attention. A woman in a simple gray uniform was on her knees, wiping up a spill on the marble floor. She worked quickly and quietly, trying not to disturb anyone. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her hands moved with practiced efficiency. She was part of the cleaning crew that had been called in when one of the guests had knocked over a tray of drinks. Robert had a few drinks in him by now. The champagne had made him feel bold and a little reckless. He was in the mood for entertainment, and suddenly an idea struck him. An idea that seemed hilarious in his slightly drunk state. "Hey, you there?" he called out loudly, his voice cutting through the polite conversation around him. The room went quiet. People turned to look. The woman on the floor froze for a moment, then slowly looked up. Her name was Maria Lopez, though Robert didn't know that. To him, she was just the cleaning lady, just part of the invisible workforce that made his life comfortable. Maria stood up slowly, clutching her cleaning cloth. Her heart started pounding. In her 3 years of working for the cleaning service, she had learned one important rule. Don't draw attention to yourself. Stay quiet, stay invisible, do your job, and go home. But now everyone was staring at her. "Come here," Robert said, gesturing broadly with his champagne glass. He had a wide smile on his face, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Maria walked toward him, her legs feeling shaky. She was 47 years old, and she had cleaned countless homes over the years. She knew how to read people. She could tell when someone was about to be kind and when someone was about to be cruel. Right now, her instincts were screaming that this wasn't going to be good. "Do you know what this is?" Robert asked, pointing at the magnificent piano behind him. It was a Steinway grand piano, glossy black and absolutely pristine. It had cost him $200,000, though he rarely played it. It was more of a decoration, really. A symbol of sophistication and culture. "It's a piano, sir," Maria said quietly, her accent carrying the rhythm of her native Colombia. "Not just any piano," Robert announced to the room, turning to make sure his guests were paying attention. They were all watching now, some with curious expressions, others looking slightly uncomfortable. "This is a Steinway grand piano, one of the finest instruments in the world. I bet you've never even touched something like this, have you?" Maria shook her head slightly. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to melt into the floor and never have to stand here under these bright lights with all these rich people staring at her. "Well, tonight's your lucky night," Robert continued, his voice dripping with false generosity. "I want you to play something for us. Show us what you've got. Let's see if the help has any hidden talents." A few people in the crowd chuckled nervously. Others looked away, suddenly finding their drinks very interesting. But no one said anything. No one told Robert to stop. They were his guests in his home, drinking his expensive champagne. Who were they to object? Maria's mind raced. She thought about her daughter, Sophia, who was in her 2nd year of college. Sophia was studying to be a nurse, and the tuition was crushing. Maria thought about her mother, who lived with her and needed expensive medications for her diabetes. She thought about the bills piled on her small kitchen table back in Queens. She thought about how desperately she needed this job. I don't really play, sir," Maria said softly, though her words tasted like ash in her mouth. "Oh, come on," Robert insisted, waving his hand dismissively. "Just try for fun. What's the harm? Unless you're scared of embarrassing yourself in front of all these fine people. More uncomfortable laughter rippled through the crowd. Maria felt her face grow hot. She could refuse. She could walk away. But then what? Would she get fired? Would the cleaning service drop her? At her age, with her limited English and lack of formal education, could she find another job that paid enough to support her family? Her hands were trembling as she walked to the piano bench. She set down her cleaning cloth on the floor beside her. The bench was smooth and perfectly polished. She sat down and for a moment she just stared at the keys. They seemed to glow under the soft lighting, like they were made of pearl instead of ivory. Robert stood behind her, arms crossed, that same smirk on his face. He was waiting for the show, waiting for her to fumble and stumble and prove that she was exactly what he thought she was: simple, uneducated, unsophisticated someone who existed to clean up after her betters. The room was completely silent now. 50 wealthy people holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen. Some felt pity for Maria, others felt curiosity. A few felt secondhand embarrassment, already cringing at what they expected would be an awkward, painful moment. But Maria wasn't thinking about any of them anymore. She placed her worn, calloused hands on the keys and something shifted inside her, something old and deep and true. Her fingers found their positions automatically, muscle memory from another lifetime taking over. She closed her eyes and let herself remember. Let herself become, just for a moment, the person she used to be, the person she was always meant to be, the person life had buried under years of struggle and sacrifice and survival. And then Maria began to play. The first notes that came from the piano were so pure, so perfect, that several people actually gasped. This wasn't someone randomly hitting keys. This wasn't amateur hour. These were the hands of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Maria's fingers moved across the keyboard with breathtaking precision and grace. The music that poured out wasn't simple. It wasn't a children's song or a basic melody. It was Rachmaninoff, one of the most technically difficult and emotionally powerful pieces ever written, and she played it flawlessly. Her body swayed slightly as her hands flew over the keys. Her eyes remained closed, and for the first time in years, Maria wasn't in that penthouse. She wasn't wearing a cleaning uniform. She wasn't worried about bills or jobs or survival. She was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere beautiful. Somewhere she had been told she could never return to. Behind her, Robert's smirk had completely vanished. His mouth hung open slightly. The champagne glass in his hand tilted, forgotten, nearly spilling. Around the room, people had stopped pretending to look away. Every single person was staring at Maria, watching this impossible, magical thing happening right before their eyes, and the music played on, filling every corner of that expensive penthouse with something money couldn't buy, something real. The music filled every corner of the penthouse like water filling a glass. Each note was crystal clear, perfectly timed, flowing into the next with such natural grace that it seemed impossible this was coming from a human being. Maria's fingers danced across the keys with the confidence of someone who had done this thousands of times before. And she had, just not in this lifetime, not in this version of herself. The piece she was playing was famous among classical music lovers. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. It was the kind of music that made people cry in concert halls. The kind of music that took years of dedicated practice to even attempt. The kind of music that separated casual players from true masters. And Maria was playing it from memory, without a single sheet of music in front of her. Her hands moved in ways that seemed almost impossible, stretching across the keys to hit chords that required the reach of someone with large hands, moving so fast in some sections that individual fingers became a blur, then slowing down for the tender parts, each note hanging in the air like a whispered secret. The contrast between the thundering, powerful sections and the soft, delicate moments was breathtaking. Around the room, faces had completely changed. The smug smiles were gone. The bored expressions had vanished. Even the people who knew nothing about classical music could tell they were witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just good. This was world class. This was the kind of performance you paid hundreds of dollars to hear at Lincoln Center. A woman in a red dress had tears running down her cheeks. She didn't bother wiping them away. A man in an expensive suit had set down his champagne glass and moved closer, not wanting to miss a single note. Another woman had pulled out her phone and was recording, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to hold it steady. Robert stood frozen behind Maria, his earlier confidence completely shattered. He felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. This was the cleaning lady, the woman he had called over as a joke, the woman he had expected to embarrass herself while his wealthy friends laughed. But there was nothing funny about this. Nothing embarrassing. This was pure artistry. Maria's whole body moved with the music now. Her shoulders swayed. Her head tilted slightly as she navigated particularly difficult passages. She was completely lost in the performance, transported to another world. The expensive penthouse disappeared. The judging eyes disappeared. Even her own worries and fears disappeared. There was only the music and the way it poured out of her soul and into the world through these keys. The piece built toward its climax. Maria's hands flew faster and faster across the keyboard. The music grew louder, more intense, more dramatic. She hit every note with perfect precision, even as the complexity increased. Her fingers were moving so quickly that it seemed physically impossible. The sound filled the room like a wave, washing over everyone present, making it hard to breathe, making hearts pound in rhythm with the music. Then gradually, the piece began to wind down. The music softened, became gentler, more contemplative. Maria's hand slowed, playing each note with such tenderness that it felt like a lullaby, like a mother singing to a sleeping child, like the last light of day fading into night. The final notes hung in the air, sweet and sad and beautiful, and then slowly faded into silence. For a long moment nobody moved, nobody breathed. The silence after such powerful music felt sacred, like the hush in a church after prayer. Maria opened her eyes slowly. She looked down at her hands on the keys as if surprised to find them there, as if she had been somewhere very far away and had just returned. She blinked a few times and suddenly she was back in the penthouse. Back in her gray uniform, back in her real life. The spell broke. Someone started clapping. Then another person joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room erupted in applause. It wasn't polite applause. It wasn't the kind of clapping you do because it's expected. This was thunderous. People were clapping so hard their hands hurt. Some were whooping and cheering. Others were still wiping tears from their faces as they applauded. Maria stood up from the piano bench looking confused and a little frightened by the reaction. She smoothed down her uniform with trembling hands. She had forgotten where she was for those few minutes. Forgotten that she was surrounded by wealthy strangers who had just watched her perform. Now the reality came crashing back and with it the fear. What would happen now? Had she done something wrong? Would Robert be angry that she had shown off? But Robert wasn't angry. He was stunned. He walked around the piano to face Maria, his expression completely different from before. The mocking smile was gone. The casual cruelty had vanished. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Actually seeing her not just as a cleaning lady but as a person, as someone with depth and history and talent. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Robert asked. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. All the arrogance had drained out of it. Maria looked at him, then at all the other faces staring at her expectantly. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like she had accidentally revealed a part of herself she had kept carefully hidden for years. Her hands were still shaking. "Juilliard," she said softly. The word came out barely louder than a whisper. The room went completely silent again. Juilliard. The name carried weight. It was one of the most prestigious music schools in the world, the kind of place that only accepted the best of the best, the kind of place that produced famous musicians and concert pianists and composers whose names everyone knew. "I graduated in 2001, Maria continued, her voice still quiet. She wasn't looking at Robert anymore. She was looking at the piano, at the keys she had just played. "I was studying to be a concert pianist. That was my dream. That was supposed to be my life." People exchanged glances. Questions hung in the air unspoken. If she had graduated from Juilliard, if she could play like that, then what was she doing cleaning houses? What had happened? How does someone go from a prestigious music school to scrubbing floors in other people's homes? Maria took a breath. "Things didn't work out the way I planned," she said simply. She didn't owe these people her story. Didn't owe them an explanation for why her life had taken the turns it had. They were strangers. Rich strangers who had just watched her perform like she was a circus animal doing a trick. She bent down and picked up her cleaning cloth from where she had left it beside the piano bench. The gesture was symbolic, a reminder of who she was supposed to be in this room. Not a concert pianist, not an artist. A cleaner. Someone invisible. Someone who existed to make their lives more comfortable. "Thank you for the opportunity to play such a beautiful instrument," Maria said with quiet dignity. She gave a small nod to Robert, then to the room at large. "Excuse me, I should get back to work." She turned and walked toward the kitchen where the rest of her cleaning supplies were waiting. Her back was straight, her head held high, even though her heart was racing and her hands were still trembling. She had just revealed herself in a way she hadn't done in years. She felt raw and exposed, like someone had peeled back her skin. Behind her, the room stayed silent for another moment. Then the whispers started. Low at first, then growing louder as people processed what they had just witnessed. A Juilliard graduate, a trained concert pianist, cleaning their floors and wiping their spills. How was that possible? What had happened to her? The questions buzzed through the room like bees. Robert stood by the piano, still staring at the doorway where Maria had disappeared. His champagne glass hung forgotten in his hand. He felt strange, uncomfortable. Something was shifting inside him, something he didn't quite understand yet. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely ashamed of himself. He had meant to humiliate this woman, to entertain his guests at her expense. Instead, she had shown him something he hadn't expected. Grace, talent, dignity. Across the room, a young woman named Jennifer Chen was still holding up her phone. She had recorded the entire performance. Her hands were shaking as she looked down at the video on her screen. She was a freelance journalist who wrote about arts and culture for various online publications. She had come to the gala with her boyfriend, who worked in finance. She hadn't expected to witness anything newsworthy, but this was a story. This was the kind of human interest piece that people shared and talked about. A Juilliard-trained pianist working as a cleaning lady. Hidden talent revealed in the most unexpected way. She looked at the video again, watching Maria's hands fly across the keys. The quality wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. The audio had captured the music beautifully. Jennifer glanced toward the kitchen where Maria had disappeared. She felt torn. Part of her knew this video could go viral, could get millions of views, could launch her career as a journalist to a whole new level. But another part of her wondered if sharing it would be exploiting this woman's private moment. Would Maria want the world to see this? Would it help her or hurt her? The party was starting to break up. The magic of the moment had faded, replaced by awkward energy. People were gathering their coats, saying their goodbyes earlier than they normally would. The mood had shifted. What was supposed to be a night of casual luxury and networking had turned into something else, something that made people feel uncomfortable in ways they couldn't quite name. Robert barely noticed his guests leaving. He was still standing by the piano, his mind far away, thinking about the woman in the gray uniform who had just turned his entire evening upside down. Robert couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about Maria's hands on the piano keys, the way she had played with such emotion, such skill, the way she had looked when she said Juilliard in that quiet, sad voice. He lay in his king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Guilt. Real, heavy, uncomfortable guilt. By 6 a.m, he gave up on sleep. He made coffee and sat in his study, watching the sunrise paint the Manhattan skyline orange and pink. Maria would arrive at 7:30 for her regular cleaning shift. She came 3 times a week, always on time, always efficient, always invisible, except now Robert couldn't stop seeing her. Couldn't stop wondering about her story. When the doorbell rang at 7:28, Robert was already waiting near the entrance. He opened the door himself instead of having his assistant do it. Maria stood there in her gray uniform, her cleaning supplies in a bag over her shoulder. When she saw Robert, her face went pale. She clearly hadn't expected him to be awake, much less waiting for her. "Good morning," Robert said. His voice was different than it had been at the party. Softer, more human. "Please come in. I'd like to talk to you before you start working." Maria's heart sank. This was it. She was going to be fired. She had embarrassed him last night by showing off. Or maybe he was angry that his guests had been talking about her instead of his expensive art and fancy penthouse. She had broken the invisible rule. Stay quiet. Stay in the background. Don't make yourself the center of attention. "I'm sorry about last night," Maria started to say, but Robert held up his hand. Don't apologize. Please. I'm the one who should be apologizing. He gestured toward his study. Would you sit with me for a few minutes? I made coffee. Maria followed him cautiously, like a deer ready to bolt at any sudden movement. The study was beautiful, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and leather furniture. Robert poured 2 cups of coffee from an expensive machine and handed one to her. Maria took it with both hands, grateful for something to hold on to. They sat across from each other. Robert looked at her directly, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in 3 years of her cleaning his home. Tell me what happened, he said simply. Please, I need to understand. Maria stared into her coffee cup. She hadn't told this story in years. Most people in her life now didn't even know about her past. Her daughter knew some of it, but not all the painful details. It was easier to just be Maria, the cleaning lady. Maria, who worked hard and paid her bills and didn't complain. Talking about who she used to be just made everything hurt more. But something about the way Robert asked made her want to tell him. Maybe it was because she was tired of carrying the weight of her lost dreams alone. Maybe it was because playing that piano last night had cracked something open inside her. Whatever the reason, she started talking. I was good at piano since I was 5 years old, she began. Her accent made the words sound like music themselves. My father worked 3 jobs so I could have lessons. We lived in a tiny apartment in Queens, just me and my parents and my 2 brothers. But my father, he believed in me. He said I had a gift. She took a sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. When I was 16, I auditioned for Juilliard. My teacher said I was crazy, that I wasn't ready, that I should wait another year. But I knew we didn't have money for another year of lessons. It was now or never. And I got in. Full scholarship. Robert listened without interrupting. He could hear the pride in her voice even after all these years. Juilliard was like a dream, Maria continued. I practiced 8-10 hours a day. I won competitions. I played with youth orchestras. By my senior year, I had an agent. A real agent who believed in me. She was planning my debut at Carnegie Hall. Everything was falling into place. Everything I had worked for my whole life was about to happen. Maria's hands tightened around the coffee cup. Then my father had a stroke. Massive. He was only 52 years old, but he had worked himself into the ground for our family. The stroke left him paralyzed on his left side. He couldn't work anymore. Couldn't do anything by himself. The pain in her voice was raw, even after more than 20 years. Robert found himself leaning forward, caught in the story. My mother didn't speak English well. She couldn't navigate the medical system, couldn't work and take care of my father at the same time. My brothers were younger, still in school, so I put everything on hold. Just for a few months, I told myself. Just until my father got better, until we figured things out. Maria laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Months became a year. My agent couldn't wait. She had other clients, younger clients with no family drama. The Carnegie Hall date was given to someone else. I tried to keep practicing, but it's hard to focus on Chopin when your father is crying in the next room because he can't feed himself. She set down her coffee cup and looked directly at Robert. Then I met someone. A man who said all the right things. He said he understood my dreams, that he would support me. I got pregnant. We weren't married, weren't really ready, but I thought maybe it would work out. Maybe this was a new chapter. He left before my daughter was born. Just disappeared one day, no note, no explanation, nothing. Maria's voice was flat now, emotionless. She had told this part of the story to herself so many times that it had lost its power to hurt her. Or maybe she had just built such thick walls around that hurt that she couldn't feel it anymore. So there I was, 23 years old, a baby on the way, a father who needed constant care, a mother who was falling apart, medical bills piling up, student loans even though I had a scholarship, because books and rent and food still cost money, and a piano career that had evaporated like morning fog. Robert felt like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart. He had grown up poor, but he had never faced anything like this. He had been able to chase his dreams without anyone depending on him. No sick parents, no unexpected pregnancy. just his own ambition, and he had to admit, a lot of luck. I tried to go back to music, Maria said. When my daughter was 2, I auditioned for a few things, small orchestras, teaching positions. But I had been gone too long. The classical music world is small, and it has a short memory. I was yesterday's news. Plus, I was older now, had responsibilities, couldn't travel for performances, couldn't practice 8 hours a day because I had a toddler who needed attention. She picked up her coffee cup again, wrapping her hands around it like it was giving her strength to continue. I took whatever jobs I could find, waitressing, retail, office cleaning. The cleaning jobs paid the best and had the most flexible hours. I could work early mornings before my daughter woke up or late nights after she went to bed. My mother watched her while I worked. My father died when my daughter was 5. Maria continued, her voice barely above a whisper now. Part of me felt relieved, and then I felt guilty for feeling relieved. But the medical bills were crushing us. After he died, things got a little easier financially, but my mother fell into a deep depression. She had dedicated everything to taking care of him, and suddenly he was gone, and she didn't know who she was anymore. Robert wanted to say something, but he couldn't find words that didn't sound empty or meaningless. What could he say? Sorry? That seemed pathetically inadequate. I still play sometimes, Maria said, and for the first time, a small smile crossed her face. At my church. They have an old piano with broken keys and a bench that wobbles. I play there on Sunday mornings for the service. For free, obviously. Nobody in my congregation has money. But when I play there, I remember who I used to be. Or who I wanted to be. Music was my first language, you know. Cleaning is just how I survive. But piano, that's who I am deep down. She looked at Robert directly, and he saw something fierce in her eyes. Something that hadn't been broken despite everything life had thrown at her. Last night, when you asked me to play, I was scared. Scared of losing my job, scared of embarrassing myself. But then I sat down at that beautiful piano, and for those few minutes, I got to speak my language again. I got to be myself. So even though you meant it as a joke, even though you wanted to humiliate me, you actually gave me a gift. You gave me a few minutes of being Maria the pianist instead of Maria the cleaning lady. Robert felt tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. He, a man who prided himself on being tough and business-minded, was about to cry. I'm so sorry, he said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I'm sorry I never saw you as a person. I'm sorry I thought it would be funny to put you on the spot like that. Maria nodded, accepting his apology. You're not a bad person, she said gently. You just forgot. Something that's easy to forget when you have money and power. You forgot that everyone has a story. Everyone has dreams. The person cleaning your floor might have been meant for something greater. Or maybe cleaning your floor is their something greater. Either way, they deserve respect. They sat in silence, for a moment, both thinking about the strange twist of fate that had brought them to this conversation. Robert's mind was racing. He wanted to help, wanted to fix this somehow. But he also knew that throwing money at someone didn't erase 20 years of lost dreams. It didn't give back the career Maria had sacrificed for her family. Still, he had to try. He had connections, resources, influence. Maybe, just maybe, he could do something meaningful for once instead of just showing off his wealth at charity galas that were really more about status than actually helping people. What if, Robert started, slowly, an idea forming in his mind. What if we could give you a second chance? What if we could get you back on stage, back in front of an audience that could appreciate what you can do? Maria looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear. I'm 47 years old, she said. In the classical music world, that's ancient for someone trying to start a performing career. And I have responsibilities. I have bills. I have my daughter's college tuition. I can't just drop everything and chase a dream that died 20 years ago. Maybe you don't have to choose, Robert said, his excitement growing. Maybe there's a way to honor both parts of who you are, the responsible mother and daughter, and the brilliant pianist. Maria wanted to believe him, but she had learned a long time ago that life rarely worked out like a fairy tale. Still, a tiny spark of hope flickered in her chest, a spark she thought had been extinguished years ago. Maria went home that morning feeling strange. The conversation with Robert had stirred up feelings she had buried for years. Hope, possibility, the dangerous belief that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet. But she pushed those feelings down as she unlocked the door to her small apartment in Queens. Hope was expensive. Hope could break your heart. Her mother was in the kitchen making breakfast. Her daughter Sophia was already gone, having left early for her nursing classes at the community college. Maria kissed her mother on the cheek and headed to her bedroom to change out of her uniform. She was tired, not just from the early morning but from carrying the weight of her memories. Telling Robert her story had felt like reopening an old wound. She changed into comfortable clothes and was about to take a nap when her phone rang. Her old phone, the one she had bought 6 years ago and kept because it still worked even though the screen was cracked. She didn't recognize the number. Hello? Mom, oh my God, Mom! It was Sophia and she was crying. Happy crying from the sound of it. Mom, you're famous. You're all over the internet! Maria's stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Someone recorded you playing piano last night. It's everywhere. TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. Mom, everyone is talking about you. Maria sat down hard on her bed. What do you mean everywhere? Hold on, I'm sending you the link. Maria's phone buzzed with a text message. She clicked on it with shaking hands. The video started playing. There she was, sitting at Robert's piano in her gray uniform. The camera was a little shaky, but the audio was clear. Crystal clear. She watched herself play, watched her hands move across the keys, heard the beautiful sound of Rachmaninoff filling the room. Below the video was a caption. NYC cleaning lady reveals she's Juilliard trained. This is what happens when life gets in the way of dreams. The video had been posted 12 hours ago. It already had 10 million views. 10 million. Maria stared at the number, sure she was reading it wrong. The comments section was flooded. Thousands and thousands of comments. This made me cry. How much talent is hidden in the world because people have to survive. She plays better than most concert pianists I've paid to see. This is why we need to support the arts. This is why education and healthcare matter. This woman should be on stage, not cleaning floors. I looked her up. Maria Lopez. She really did go to Juilliard. This is real. Maria's phone started ringing again, and again, and again. Numbers she didn't recognize. She was afraid to answer. Her mother came to the bedroom doorway looking worried. Mija, what's happening? Your phone won't stop. Before Maria could answer, there was a knock at the door. Then another. Her mother went to look through the peephole and gasped. There are people outside with cameras. Maria felt like she was going to be sick. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. She was just a cleaning lady, just someone trying to get by. She didn't want attention. She didn't want cameras. She just wanted to live her quiet life and not be noticed. But it was too late for that now. By noon, the video had 20 million views. News vans were parked outside Maria's apartment building. Her phone had died from all the calls and messages, so she had it plugged in and turned off. Sophia had come home from school early, too excited and overwhelmed to concentrate on classes. They sat together at the small kitchen table, trying to figure out what to do. Mom, this is amazing, Sophia kept saying. Don't you see? This is your chance. Everyone wants to hear you play. But Maria felt paralyzed. She had spent 20 years being invisible, being quiet, not drawing attention, and now the whole world was watching. Concert halls were calling. Talk shows wanted her as a guest. A morning news program wanted to interview her. Record labels were reaching out. It was too much, too fast, too overwhelming. I can't do this, Maria said, her head in her hands. I have work tomorrow. I have bills to pay. I can't just stop my life because of a video. Mom, Sophia said gently, taking her mother's hands. Maybe this is the life you were supposed to have. Maybe this is the universe giving you a second chance. Maria's mother, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Your father would want you to do this. He sacrificed everything so you could play piano. Don't let his sacrifice be for nothing. The words hit Maria like a physical blow. Her father, the man who had worked himself to death so she could have a chance at her dreams. She started crying, really crying. For the first time in years, All the grief and regret and lost possibilities came pouring out. While Maria was hiding in her apartment trying to process what was happening, the video continued to spread. It showed up on national news. A famous cellist shared it on social media with the comment, "This is one of the most beautiful performances of Rachmaninoff I've ever heard." Music professors at Juilliard were sharing it, remembering the talented young student named Maria Lopez who had disappeared after graduation. But the video also caught Robert's attention in a different way. He saw how some posts on social media were framing the story. They weren't just celebrating Maria's talent. They were asking questions. Who was the man who called her over as a joke? Who was the rich guy who thought it would be funny to embarrass his cleaning lady? Some people had recognized Robert in the background of the video. His name was being mentioned. Not in a good way. Robert's PR team was panicking. They wanted him to make a statement. To defend himself. To explain that he hadn't known about Maria's background. But Robert didn't want to make excuses. He had been wrong. He had been cruel. And now he had a chance to do something about it. He called Maria's phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail. So he did something he never did. He got in his car and drove to Queens. He had the address from the cleaning service's records. When he arrived, he saw the news vans and reporters crowding the street. He pushed through them, ignoring their questions, and knocked on Maria's door. Sophia answered, her eyes widening when she recognized him. "You're the guy from the video." "I am. I need to talk to your mother, please." Maria appeared behind Sophia, looking exhausted. Her eyes were red from crying. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile than she had seemed in his penthouse. "Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry about all this. I didn't know anyone was recording. I didn't want any of this attention. Can I come in?" Robert asked. "I have an idea. Something that might help both of us. But more importantly, something that might give you what you deserve." Maria hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. They sat in her small living room, so different from his spacious penthouse. Her mother brought them water in mismatched glasses. Sophia sat nearby, protective of her mother, ready to throw Robert out if he said one wrong thing. Robert took a breath and began. "I've made a lot of money in my life. I've built a successful company. I've bought expensive things. I've thrown fancy parties. But I've never done anything meaningful with any of it. Watching you play last night, hearing your story this morning, it made me realize something. Wealth means nothing if you don't use it to help people, to fix the things that are broken in this world." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I want to set up a foundation, in your name, to help musicians who had to give up their careers because of family obligations or financial problems. People like you who have talent but were forced to choose between their dreams and survival. And I want to personally fund something else." Maria waited, afraid to hope. 3 months from now, I want you to perform at Carnegie Hall, the debut you were supposed to have 20 years ago. I'll use every connection I have to make it happen. I'll personally cover all the costs. Every ticket sold will go directly to you and the foundation. No strings attached. This is me trying to make up for being a terrible person. This is me trying to do one good thing with my money and privilege." The room was completely silent. Sophia had her hand over her mouth. Maria's mother had tears streaming down her face. And Maria just stared at Robert, unable to speak. "Why would you do this?" she finally asked. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do," Robert said quietly. "I owe you an apology that's bigger than words. I owe the world a chance to hear what I almost kept hidden. And maybe, selfishly, I owe myself a chance to be better than I've been." Sophia grabbed her mother's hand. "Mom, say yes. Please say yes." Maria looked at her daughter's hopeful face, at her mother's tears, at Robert's sincere expression. She thought about her father, who had believed in her so completely. She thought about all the years of pushing down her dreams, of telling herself it was okay, that she had made the right choices. Maybe she had made the right choices back then, but maybe now it was time to make a different choice. "Okay," Maria whispered. "Yes, I'll do it." Sophia screamed with joy and threw her arms around her mother. Maria's mother started praying in Spanish, thanking God and Maria's father. Robert smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes, maybe for the first time in years. Outside, the news reporters were still waiting. They had no idea that inside this small Queens apartment, a woman's life was about to change forever. That a second chance was being born. That sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best ones. Maria hugged her daughter and let herself feel something she hadn't felt in 20 years. Hope. Real, genuine, terrifying hope. And this time she wasn't going to push it down. This time she was going to let it lift her up. The next 3 months passed like a dream. A beautiful, exhausting, terrifying dream that Maria kept thinking she would wake up from. But she didn't wake up. This was real. This was actually happening. Robert kept his promise. He used every connection he had, called in every favor, and made Carnegie Hall happen. The concert sold out in less than 4 hours. People were paying hundreds of dollars for tickets. Some were paying thousands. Everyone wanted to see the cleaning lady who could play like an angel. Everyone wanted to be part of the story. But preparing for the concert was harder than Maria had imagined. She hadn't performed in front of a real audience in over 20 years. Her technique was still there, buried deep in her muscle memory, but it needed work. Her fingers weren't as nimble as they used to be. Her back hurt after long practice sessions, and the crushing fear of failure, kept her awake at night. Robert hired the best piano teacher in New York to work with her, a woman named Patricia, who had trained dozens of successful concert pianists. Patricia was tough but kind. She pushed Maria hard, but she also understood what Maria was going through. "You're not the same pianist you were at 23, Patricia told her during one particularly frustrating practice session. "And that's okay. That's actually good. You have something now that you didn't have back then. Life experience, pain, loss, joy. All of that comes through in your playing. That's what people heard in that video. Not just technical skill, but soul." Maria practiced 6 hours a day. Sophia helped by taking over more of the household responsibilities. Her mother cooked and cleaned and said prayers every night for her daughter's success. And Robert surprisingly became a real friend. He showed up at Maria's apartment regularly, bringing coffee and encouragement. He sat through practice sessions listening with genuine appreciation. He was learning something too. Learning to see people, learning to value things that couldn't be bought. The foundation was set up officially, the Maria Lopez Foundation for Musicians in Need. It already had millions of dollars in funding from Robert and donations from people who had been moved by Maria's story. They had received over 3,000 applications from musicians who needed help. Single parents trying to afford music lessons for talented kids, older musicians who couldn't afford their instruments anymore, students who had to drop out of music school because of family emergencies. Maria spent hours reading their stories, crying over them, understanding that her experience wasn't unique. There were thousands of people like her, thousands of dreams deferred or destroyed by the simple need to survive. As the concert date approached, Maria's nerves got worse. She was waking up at 3 in the morning, her heart pounding, sure she would forget everything on stage, sure she would embarrass herself in front of thousands of people, sure this whole thing was a terrible mistake. 2 days before the concert, she called Robert in a panic. "I can't do this. I'm going to fail. I'm going to let everyone down." Robert drove to her apartment immediately. They sat in her small living room and he looked at her seriously. "You're right. You might fail. The concert might not go perfectly. You might hit a wrong note or forget a passage. But you know what? You're still going to be brave. You're still going to be someone who got a second chance and took it. That alone is success. That alone is worth celebrating." He paused, then continued. "Besides, the people coming to that concert aren't coming to judge you. They're coming to cheer for you. They're coming because your story gave them hope. Because if you can get a second chance, maybe they can too. You're not just playing for yourself. You're playing for everyone who ever had to choose between their dreams and their responsibilities." Maria took a deep breath. He was right. This was bigger than her fear, bigger than her perfectionism. This was about something that mattered. The night of the concert arrived. Maria stood backstage at Carnegie Hall in an elegant dark blue gown that a designer had donated for the occasion. Her hands were shaking. She could hear the murmur of the crowd filling the hall. 2,800 people, all there to see her. Sophia and her mother sat in the front row, both wearing their best dresses, both crying before the concert even started. Next to them sat Patricia, her teacher, looking proud. And in the back row, in a seat he had insisted on, sat Robert. He had turned down the VIP box seat Maria had offered him. He wanted to be where he could see everyone's faces, where he could be part of the audience, not separate from it. A stage manager touched Maria's arm gently. "It's time." Maria walked out onto the stage. The lights were bright and hot. The Steinway grand piano sat in the center, spotlit, waiting. The audience erupted in applause before she even reached the bench. They were already on her side, already celebrating her. She sat down, adjusted the bench slightly, and looked out at the sea of faces. For just a moment she saw her father. Not really, of course. He had been dead for years. But in her heart she felt him there, felt his belief in her, felt his pride. She placed her hands on the keys and felt all the fear drain away. This was where she belonged. This was who she was. She began to play. The program included Rachmaninoff, of course, the piece from the viral video. But she also played Chopin, Debussy, and a short piece she had composed herself during the past 3 months. She called it The Long Road Home. It was about loss and sacrifice and finding your way back to yourself. It was her story in musical form. The performance wasn't perfect. She did hit one wrong note in the Chopin. She did lose her place briefly in a difficult passage. But it didn't matter. What came through was emotion, honesty, a lifetime of longing and love poured into every note. People in the audience were crying openly. Some were holding hands. Some had their eyes closed, lost in the music. When Maria played the final notes of her own composition, the ending soft and bittersweet and hopeful, the silence that followed felt sacred. Then the audience exploded. Everyone was on their feet, applauding, cheering, some people shouting, "Brava!" Sophia was sobbing. Her mother was clutching her chest. Patricia was applauding with tears streaming down her face, and in the back row Robert was standing too, clapping so hard his hands hurt. He looked around at all these people, from every walk of life, united in their appreciation for something beautiful, something real. He realized he was crying too. He who never cried, who prided himself on being tough and unemotional, had tears running down his face. Maria stood at the piano and bowed. The applause went on for 5 full minutes. People didn't want to stop, didn't want the moment to end. Finally, Maria walked off stage, overwhelmed and exhausted and happier than she had been in 20 years. Backstage, Sophia threw herself into her mother's arms. "Mom, you did it. You were incredible." Maria held her daughter tight and looked over her shoulder at her mother, who was smiling through tears. "Your father saw this," her mother said in Spanish. "I know he did." The next day the reviews came out. They were glowing. A triumph of the human spirit, technical mastery combined with emotional depth rarely seen in concert halls. Maria, Lopez reminded us why music matters. The video of the Carnegie Hall performance was shared millions of times. But this time Maria wasn't scared. She was ready. In the months that followed, Maria performed regularly. She gave concerts to raise money for the foundation. She taught master classes for young musicians. She became a voice for artists who struggled to balance their dreams with reality. But she also kept her feet on the ground. She still lived in her small Queens apartment. Still cooked dinner with her mother. Still helped Sophia study for her nursing exams. And once a month she had dinner with Robert. They had become unlikely friends, bound together by the strange night that had changed both their lives. Robert was different now, softer, more aware. He volunteered with the foundation. He listened more and talked less. He learned that money was just a tool. What mattered was what you built with it. One evening, over Chinese takeout in Maria's apartment, Robert said, "You know, I think about that night all the time. I think about who I was, what I almost missed seeing." Maria smiled. "I think about it too. I was so angry at you that night. So scared and humiliated, but now I'm grateful. You gave me my voice back. Even if you didn't mean to. Even if you were trying to do the opposite." "I was cruel," Robert said quietly. "I don't deserve credit for accidentally doing something good." "Maybe not," Maria agreed. "But you do deserve credit for what you did after. For choosing to be better. That's harder than being good from the start. That takes real courage." They sat in comfortable silence, two people from completely different worlds who had somehow found common ground. Outside the window, the city buzzed with life. Millions of people, each with their own stories, their own dreams, their own struggles. Maria thought about all the talent hidden in the world, all the brilliant minds working in factories, all the artists driving delivery trucks, all the musicians cleaning houses. Not because they lacked ability, but because life had demanded different choices. Her story had a happy ending, but she knew most stories didn't. That's why the foundation mattered. That's why she kept performing, kept teaching, kept telling her story. Because everyone deserved a second chance. Everyone deserved to be seen. Everyone deserved the opportunity to become who they were meant to be. Sophia came home from classes, tired but smiling. "Mom, there's a girl in my nursing program who plays violin. She had to sell her violin last year to pay for textbooks." I told her about the foundation. Maria's eyes lit up. "Give me her information. We'll get her another violin." And so it continued. One small miracle leading to another. One second chance creating the possibility for more. The cleaning lady who played piano had reminded the world of something important. That dignity has nothing to do with job titles. That worth isn't measured in bank accounts. That sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected places. And that we're all just one moment away from becoming who we're supposed to be. All we need is someone to give us a chance. And the courage to take it.